And now we return to our story on the delayed assent to the budget 2017. Joining me to discuss this is Mr. Eze Onyekpere, Executive Director, Center for Social Justice. He joins us from our studios in Abuja. Good evening, Mr. Onyekpere.
Yeah, good evening.
Now, what do you make of this entire process? First, we had the long-running fight over the budget itself and the deliberations in the National Assembly. Now we have further delay in assenting to it and turning it into law. What do you make of the whole scenario?
Well, in the first place, the executive prepared the budget and sent it to the National Assembly very late. It was submitted, I think it was on the 14th or 15th of December. And as soon as they collected it, they proceeded on their Christmas and New Year legislative break and came back and started working on it and promised Nigerians that they will finish the budget by the end of February. Unfortunately, they delayed so long and transmitted it to the acting president on May 19th or thereabout. And we now have the executive come back to take a long time in examining the budget again. We're a little bit worried because we are talking of being the middle of the year and we don't have a budget here. So we don't know exactly when the implementation will start. If you look at the budget of most of the votes of most of the MDAs, you find a situation where it's about 20-30 pages with the exception of, say, Ministry of Education and Ministry of, say, Health and maybe Science and Technology. So we had a situation where we expected that in 2-3 days after receiving the budget, the MDA should have come out to say this is exactly what was the difference between what was submitted by the executive and what the legislature returned. And by now they should have made their demands clear to the National Assembly whether they want to assent or not. So it's a little bit surprising. So it's not proper. This is not the right way to go. And it's delaying a lot of things in the economy.
Now we're hearing stories, reports that is, that part of the reason for the delay in assenting to it at the level of the executive is that the National Assembly made so many insertions into the budget. That is, they brought about new items which they included in the budget and which contributed to the rise in the total sum of almost 140 billion, and that it is that the executive is looking at.
Well, if you recollect that at the time they submitted the medium-term expenditure framework, the oil benchmark price was about less than what is exactly the legislature approved. The legislature approved about $2.50 more than what was submitted, so they got more money, although one had expected that they will use it to reduce the deficit instead of appropriating for new projects. This all raises the whole question of the duties of the executive and the legislature in the appropriation process. I had some colleagues say earlier in the news that the legislature has no business increasing or adding projects, or that the whole thing should have been just like more or less like a rubber stamp as presented by the executive. If you look at the Constitution very clearly, it talked about the president presenting estimates. The word used is estimates. And if you look at it, there's nothing so strange about it. It's just a bill like every other bill. And there's no way you expect a bill to come into the National Assembly and exit the National Assembly exactly the same way it was presented. In some other jurisdictions, there are clear demarcations about the extent of what the legislature can do and the extent of what the executive can do. But our constitution was a little bit silent. And so it created just that provision like more or less any other bill. But I want to submit, with utmost respect to everybody who has said executive should have the upper hand or legislature should have the upper hand, the process of making a budget for me is like the process of making a baby. You cannot say because you are the man you should have the upper hand. You cannot say because of the woman it will be in your belly for 9 months. Therefore, you must need to sit down together and agree to make the baby, even if you are using artificial insemination. So until the executive and the legislature understand it that way, then we will keep having these challenges. What I expect is that at the beginning of the process, the executive at the time of preparation should take the legislature into confidence. Tell them the parameters of what they want to do. Tell them what they want to approve for, what they are voting for each MDA, and what the details are. And at that level, they will now discuss it and agree, so that when the budget now comes before the legislature, it's more or less a done deal. So if they just shut out the legislature and do all you want to do, they wait at you at the end of the day. So, okay, you are coming back to us. When you come to us, then we do our own deal. And at the end of the day, you have this kind of scenario. If you recollect that best practices in preparing the medium-term sector strategies of MDAs, which now dovetails into the medium-term expenditure framework, there is supposed to be a committee, not just of the MDA, key staff of the MDA alone. Private sector is supposed to be represented. The National Assembly Committee with oversight is supposed to be there. Civil society is supposed to be represented. Professional associations are supposed to be here, so that at the time you move from the medium-term sector strategy to the medium-term expenditure framework to the budget, you already have a consensus of broad stakeholders in that sector. But that doesn't happen. So at the end of the day, executive will do their own thing, the legislature will wait and then do their own thing. That's why you always have this quagmire year after year. I repeat, these things don't have to always be defined in black and white in law.
Mr. Ayope,
it is a question of behaving responsibly, and people behaving that they actually sucked well from their mother's breast and know what is very good for them to do.
Thank you very much for joining us. Mr. Eze Onyakwere is the lead director of the Center for Social Justice. I'll be discussing the delayed assent to the 2017 budget. Moving on to other stories, President Muhammadu Buhari will be back home soon, and these are the words of the wife of the president, Aisha, who returned from the United Kingdom today, where she went to visit her husband, whom she says is recuperating speedily. Conveying the appreciation of the president to Nigerians for their prayers, Mrs. Buhari called on Nigerians to support the acting president, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, who she describes as a loyal friend and colleague to the president and the country.
Why I visited my husband in the UK. He's doing well, much better than he left Nigeria. And I wish to assure Nigerians that he's recuperating very well. And also he thanks Nigerians for their constant prayers and steadfastness in the face of challenges. He's soliciting for Nigerians' prayers, cooperation, and support of the acting president, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, towards achieving the mandate of this administration.
And indeed, we're staying in the Federal Capital Territory, where Markwa is our guide for the rest of the stories from there. Markwa, good evening.
Well, thank you, Ladi. We're moving now to Ekiti State, where multiple protests have rocked the city of Ado-Ekiti, the capital of Ekiti State, over a recent call to probe the former state governor and current minister of solid minerals, Kayode Fayemi. While one of the group is challenging the competence of the State Judicial Commission of Inquiry to probe the former governor, the other is supporting the probe by the state government. The two groups marched separately, displaying placards bearing their messages.
Protesters and counter-protesters in the city of Ado-Ekiti, the capital of Ekiti State. First is a group of students who on Monday marched through the streets demanding that the former governor of the state and current minister of solid minerals, Mr. Kayode Fayemi, appears before the State Judicial Commission of Inquiry on allegations of fraud.
Today we have a conglomeration of all student union movements in Ekiti State, Fountain of Knowledge, and we are here to register our own campaign against corruptible practices among public office holders in the nation. And we are saying that this fight against corruption should not be sectional and it should be extended to various states, the 30 states in the nation. And we are calling on Dr. Kayode Fayemi, former governor of Ekiti State, to come to the state and respond to the allegations that 850 million naira was siphoned from Subeb account. The money meant for Subeb was siphoned from him. This is an allegation.
Barely 24 hours after, another group of youth under the aegis of support for President Buhari's anti-corruption war marched through the streets challenging the basis for the previous protest. They described the Monday's protest as a witch hunt and an attempt to nail the former governor.
It's about the legality of a panel, which I call a kangaroo panel, set up by the governor of Ekiti State, which is only aimed to persecute Dr. Kayode Fayemi, the former governor of this state and the honorable minister of Mines and Steel Development in Nigeria, by Order 23 of their own order, the extant law of the House, the House is not allowed to talk or to decide or to take any decision on a matter that is in court. That is sub judice.
The former governor of Ekiti State, Mr. Kayode Fayemi, and his supporters have been at loggerhead with the incumbent government and its supporters since the allegation of financial mismanagement was leveled against the former governor last year. Meanwhile, Mr. Fayemi has also approached the court to challenge the competence of the inquiry set up by the incumbent government.